The backstage area of America's Got Talent buzzed with its usual nervous energy, contestants pacing, production assistants rushing around, and the low hum of audience chatter bleeding through the thick curtains. But amid all that chaos stood one young man who didn't quite fit the scene. Dressed in a uniquely designed Elvis-inspired outfit, he stood quietly in the corner, hands clasped, eyes lowered. The suit shimmered under the backstage lights, not overly flashy but carefully made. Instead of the traditional, rhinestone-heavy Elvis jumpsuit, his was stitched with a subtle barong-inspired pattern, a soft nod to his Filipino heritage woven into the king's iconic style. His chest rose and fell with slow, controlled breaths. This was his moment, his chance. A dream he carried across borders, oceans, and years of singing in street corners, birthday gigs, and tiny neighborhood gatherings back home. He had practiced in his small bedroom in Manila, his voice echoing through thin walls as he imagined this exact stage. But imagining it and standing here, feet inches away from the world's biggest platform, were two very different things. A production assistant approached him with a warm smile. "You're next," she said, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. He looked up with shy eyes, nodded, and gave a small, grateful smile. His fingers trembled. He wasn't afraid of singing. He had sung all his life, but this was a different kind of fear. This was the fear of being judged, misunderstood, compared to an icon he never claimed to replace. He only wanted to honor the music he loved, the music that shaped him. "Contestant ready," another crew member called through a headset. The giant black curtains parted slightly. The stage lights spilled in, a soft golden glow that seemed both inviting and intimidating. As he stepped forward, each foot felt heavier than the last. He could hear the roar of the crowd now. Thousands of voices blended into one thunderous sound. It vibrated in the floor beneath him, in the railing he brushed with his hand, even in his heartbeat. The moment he stepped into the open, the stage transformed him from unknown dreamer to someone the entire theater was staring at. He walked toward the center with careful steps, almost floating. The judges' table waited in front of him. Howie's curious eyes, Heidi's warm smile, Sofia's encouraging excitement, and Simon's unmistakable, unreadable expression. Simon leaned back in his chair, arms folded, studying him in a way that made his nerves twist even tighter. The audience quieted gradually, whispers fading into silence as they took in his appearance. A Filipino Elvis? The idea alone intrigued them, confused them, amused some of them. A few leaned forward, expecting a fun impersonation, or maybe even a comedic act. Cameras zoomed in, his glossy black hair styled in a modern Elvis wave, his understated jumpsuit with Filipino detailing, his gentle, almost bashful smile. "Hello," Howie began. "Tell us your name." He cleared his throat, softly, the microphone almost amplifying his nervousness. "My name is Elijah," he said in a mild voice that contrasted sharply with the bold look he wore. "I'm from the Philippines." His accent was warm and gentle. Heidi and Sofia both smiled brightly. "And what inspired the Elvis look?" Sofia asked with genuine curiosity. He grinned a little, looking down before answering. "I grew up listening to Elvis with my grandfather. He taught me the songs, and I feel like when I sing them, he's here with me." The room softened instantly. Even Simon's stern expression shifted, if only slightly. Elijah glanced at the floor, gathering himself. He could feel hundreds of eyes on him, thousands more through the cameras, yet there was a strange stillness in him now, a calm that came only when he spoke about his grandfather. "And what will you be singing for us today?" Simon asked, his tone neutral but attentive. Elijah raised his gaze, meeting Simon's eyes. "I'll be singing an Elvis classic," he replied, voice barely above a whisper. Simon nodded. "All right, good luck." Elijah's heart pounded louder than the audience's silence. He stepped back gently, positioning himself in the center of the stage. His fingers trembled by his sides, but as he took a slow, steady breath, something inside him shifted. He wasn't here to be Elvis. He wasn't here to impress or mimic or show off. He was here to feel, to share, to let the music speak for him. The lights dimmed slightly. A single warm spotlight bathed him in a soft glow. The opening notes of the instrumental began to play. Low, melancholic, nostalgic, the kind of sound that instantly transported people to another time, another memory. Then, a hush fell over the entire theater. BR people waited, some curious, some doubtful, some excited. Simon leaned forward just an inch. Heidi folded her hands with anticipation. A couple of audience members pulled out their phones, ready to record what they expected to be a fun tribute act. Elijah closed his eyes for a brief moment, whispering something under his breath. Perhaps a prayer, perhaps a message to his grandfather, perhaps just a promise to himself to give everything he had. When he opened his eyes again, they were different. Steady, glowing, ready. And as the music reached the point of his first note, the entire room leaned in without realizing it. Everyone waited. Everyone wondered, would this Filipino Elvis be just another tribute act? Or would he become something unforgettable? In that final second before he sang, Elijah inhaled deeply and lifted his head toward the audience, his expression calm and full of quiet emotion. Then, he opened his mouth, and the world stood still. The very moment Elijah released his first note, something extraordinary happened, something no one in the theater expected. It wasn't just the sound of his voice, it was the feeling behind it. His tone was deep, velvety, and hauntingly rich, holding that unmistakable Elvis warmth, yet mixed with a raw human vulnerability that made it uniquely his own. A ripple went through the crowd. People who moments earlier whispered or giggled at the idea of a Filipino Elvis suddenly froze, mouths slightly open. Phones held up to record suddenly steadied, as if their owners didn't want to ruin the moment with shaky hands. For a split second, it felt like time had paused between the walls of the AGT theater. On the judges' panel, the transformation was instant. Heidi's eyes widened, her lips parting in shock. She wasn't expecting that depth. Nobody was. Sofia's hand rose instinctively to cover her mouth, her eyes watering almost the moment the note hit. Howie leaned forward, eyebrows raised, an expression that said, "Wait, where did that come from?" But the most telling reaction came from Simon. He blinked. Slowly. Then he leaned in, hands folded, his usual guarded posture dissolving into one of unfiltered attention. It was the kind of reaction he only gave when someone cut through the noise, the mediocrity, the gimmicks, and delivered pure, undeniable talent. Elijah continued to sing, and with every word, with every rise and fall in his voice, the emotion deepened. It wasn't a performance, it was a confession, a release, a journey through memories, of singing on rooftops during brownouts, serenading neighbors during fiestas, humming Elvis tunes by the riverbanks of his hometown. Losing his grandfather, growing up in a world where dreams felt too big for the small places he lived in. Every emotion he had carried for years poured out through that single voice. The audience felt it. The song's melody wrapped around the theater like a warm blanket, while the pain and longing in his tone pierced through hearts like sharp, beautiful glass. People found themselves tearing up before they realized why. Some wiped their cheeks quietly. Others didn't even bother hiding their emotions. A group of young women near the stage clutched their hands to their chests, visibly trembling. As he reached the middle section of the song, his voice soared, clear, powerful, aching. The type of note that feels like a plea, like a soul trying to reach out and touch another soul. And he succeeded. The judges were not just listening, they were feeling. Sofia nodded as tears streamed down her cheeks. Heidi placed a hand over her heart. Howie whispered something inaudibly, possibly wow. And Simon sat completely still, eyes glistening, not crying yet but dangerously close. Elijah's gaze lifted slightly as he sang the next few lines. He didn't look at the audience. He didn't look at the judges. He looked beyond the lights, beyond the cameras, as if singing directly to someone who wasn't in the room, someone who had inspired him, someone he missed. That silent communication between him and a memory tightened the entire atmosphere. Suddenly his voice cracked ever so slightly, not from strain, but from emotion. That tiny break made the performance even more real, more raw, more heartbreaking. The crowd couldn't hold it anymore. Soft sobs echoed, sniffles filled the air, even the camera operator behind the stage wiped away a tear while continuing to film. Then came the final stretch of the song. Soft, trembling, and full of soul. Elijah delivered the ending with a quiet strength, letting the last note float beautifully into the air, lingering like a final goodbye. When the note faded, there was no sound, not applause, not cheering, just silence. A silence filled with awe. A silence heavy with emotion. A silence that said everything without a single word. Elijah lowered the microphone slightly, breathing hard. Not because the song was difficult, but because he had given everything he had. And as he stood there, chest rising and falling, the crowd finally reacted. For a few long, fragile seconds after Elijah's final note faded, the theater remained suspended in absolute silence. It wasn't the awkward kind of silence. It was the rare, precious kind that only comes after witnessing something sacred. The kind that wraps itself around everyone in the room and refuses to let go. Elijah stood in the center of the stage, chest rising and falling, hands trembling just enough to reveal how much of himself he had poured into the song. The spotlight warmed his skin, but the weight of thousands of eyes made his breath catch. He wasn't sure what would happen next. Had he done enough? Had he honored his grandfather? Had he made his country proud? Then, as if someone flipped a switch, a single clap echoed from the back of the theater, then another, and suddenly, the entire audience rose to their feet in a tidal wave of emotion. The applause exploded like a storm, loud and relentless. Cheers, whistles, shouts of bravo, and yes, filled the air until the stage floor vibrated beneath Elijah's feet. People weren't just applauding, they were releasing the emotion he had stirred in them. They clapped with their whole bodies, many of them crying as they did so. Elijah blinked, stunned. Tears filled his eyes, not the dramatic stage kind, but the genuine, overwhelmed kind that slipped down before he even realized he was crying. Then came the judges. Sofia stood up first, her hands high above her head, clapping vigorously, tears streaming freely down her cheeks. She wasn't trying to hide her emotion, she embraced it. That was, oh my God, she said between breaths, overwhelmed. Heidi rose next, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. She placed a hand over her heart, shaking her head slowly, as if she couldn't believe what she had just experienced. Her voice cracked when she whispered, "Beautiful. Just beautiful." Howie stood as well, smiling from ear to ear. His eyes sparkled with the kind of excitement he rarely showed, unless something truly special walked onto that stage. "Unbelievable!" he shouted over the applause. "That was pure magic!" But all eyes turned to Simon. Simon Cowell was still seated, not because he wasn't impressed, but because he was visibly fighting emotion. His chest rose sharply as he exhaled, trying to maintain composure. His eyes glimmered with the unmistakable shine of unshed tears. He swallowed hard, pressing his lips together. Then, slowly, deliberately, Simon stood. But the crowd erupted even louder, if that was possible. Simon's standing ovation wasn't just applause, it was a statement, a confirmation, a rare seal of approval that only a few contestants in AGT history had ever received. Elijah's breath hitched. The standing ovation continued, unbroken, roaring like a wave that refused to recede. Elijah bowed deeply, overwhelmed, his hand pressed firmly to his chest, as if holding his heart in place. Finally, the applause softened enough for the judges to speak. Sofia leaned into her microphone, still emotional. "Elijah, I felt every second of that performance, every note, every breath. I cried from the very start, and I'm still crying. You touched all of us." Heidi nodded. "You didn't just sing an Elvis song, you lived it. You transformed it into something personal, something so emotional. I felt your heart in every word." Howie added, "That wasn't imitation, that was expression. You honored Elvis, but you also made the song your own. That is talent. That is artistry." Then Simon leaned forward, his voice notably softer than usual. "Elijah," he said, pausing as if searching for the right words. "I didn't expect to cry today. But you made that happen." The audience gasped softly, knowing how rare it was to hear that from him. Simon continued, "I've heard many Elvis impersonations in my life, but what you've done is different. You didn't come out here to copy him. You came out here with your heart, and we all felt it. This is one of the most emotional performances we've ever had on AGT." Elijah covered his mouth with both hands, unable to stop the tears now falling freely. Sofia leaned in and laughed gently through her tears. "Press the golden buzzer already," she joked, causing the audience to roar with excitement. The crowd began chanting, "Golden buzzer, golden buzzer, golden buzzer." Elijah shook his head, overwhelmed, smiling through tears as he stared out at the thousands of people cheering his name. Whether the golden buzzer would come or not, one thing was certain. That night, that stage, that performance, had changed his life forever.